They had it all, a stacked young roster, one of the most loyal fan bases in hockey, a city that lived for the game. The Quebec Nordiques were finally on the verge of something big. After years of struggle, they had the pieces to finally chase the Stanley Cup. And then, just like that, they were gone. Sold off, relocated, rebranded, with their best players hoisting the cup in another city the very next season. So how does a team with that much talent, that much promise, and that much support end up abandoned? This isn't just a story about relocation. It's about money, politics, broken promises, and the cold reality of professional sports. This is the rise and fall of the Quebec Nordiques, the franchise abandoned by the NHL. The Quebec Nordiques journey began in 1972, not in the NHL, but in the upstart World Hockey Association, WHA, which was a direct competitor to the NHL, aiming to challenge its monopoly on top-level professional hockey in North America. The franchise was originally intended to be based in San Francisco, but financial problems led to its sale to the Quebec investors just months before the WHA's first face-off. They named the team Les Nordiques, meaning Northerners or Northmen, a nod to Quebec's northern identity. Hockey legend Maurice Rocket Richard was briefly installed as the first head coach, a symbolic passing of the torch from Quebec's hockey's past, though he resigned after only 2 games behind the bench. Despite early hurdles, Major Professional League Hockey had finally arrived in Quebec City. On home ice at the historic Colisée de Québec, the Nordiques gradually found their footing. The team soon boasted star power. Former Montreal Canadian Marc Tardif and local sniper Réal Cloutier became prolific scorers, earning the admiration of fans hungry for a hometown hero. The Nordiques' persistence paid off in 1977 when they captured the WHA's championship, the Avco World Trophy. Cloutier and Tardif dominated the league's scoring charts during those years, showing that Quebec's team could compete with anyone. By the time the WHA merged with the NHL in 1979, Quebec had claimed 2 WHA division titles and established itself as a passionate hockey market. In 1979, the Nordiques were one of the 4 WHA survivors admitted to the NHL, alongside Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Hartford. Quebec City suddenly went from hoisting a Red Bull League to facing the storied Original Six and other NHL clubs. The Nordiques played their first NHL game on October 10, 1979, against the Atlanta Flames. Early on, they struggled to shake the expansion team label, but a bold influx of talent soon altered their fate. One of the most pivotal moments in franchise history came in 1980, when the Nordiques pulled off an unexpected coup. They brought in Peter Stastny and his brothers Anton and Marian, who defected from communist Czechoslovakia to pursue their hockey dreams. Peter Stastny's impact was immediate and profound. He won the Calder Trophy as NHL Rookie of the Year in the 1980-81 season after scoring 109 points, a rookie record at the time. The Stastny's arrival signaled a cultural shift in the NHL, as they were among the first major stars from Eastern Europe to thrive in North America. Peter quickly became one of the league's top playmakers, recording 7 100-point seasons in Quebec and ultimately becoming the franchise's all-time leading scorer with 1,048 points. His slick passing and hockey IQ, combined with Anton and Marian's contributions, turned the once humble Nordiques into an offensive force. Longtime Nordique Michel Goulet, a sharpshooting winger drafted in 1979, also emerged as a superstar. He notched 6 straight 40-plus goal seasons and still holds the team record with 57 goals in 1982-83. The Nordiques' rapid rise set the stage for a fierce rivalry with their provincial big brother, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Battle of Quebec was born. By the early 1980s, Nordiques versus Canadian games crackled with intensity. Regular season meetings were hyped for weeks in advance, and come playoff time, the rivalry became explosive. Nowhere was this more evident than the infamous Good Friday Massacre on April 20th, 1984, a playoff brawl between the teams that saw multiple bench-clearing fights and bad blood spilling all over national TV. As Montreal Hall of Famer Larry Robinson recalled, the Quebec-Montreal rivalry goes way beyond hockey, to the politics and everything else. A duel between 2 proud French-Canadian cities, one an established metropolis and the other an upstart capital. The Nordiques fed off this energy. In 1982 and 1985, they met Montreal in dramatic playoff series. Quebec memorably upset the Canadiens in a 7-game thriller in 1985, with Peter Stastny, scoring an overtime winner in Game 7. These victories sent shockwaves through La Belle province. By 1984, as the two teams battled in that fateful Good Friday game, Quebec had actually finished ahead of Montreal in the standings, signaling that Quebec was no longer the little brother, but a genuine contender. Riding their talented roster, the Nordiques reached new heights in the mid-1980s. In the 1985-86 season, Quebec claimed its first NHL division title, finishing atop the Adams division, ahead of powerhouse Montreal and Boston. The city rejoiced as the Nordiques seemed poised to join the league's elite. However, that success was bittersweet. In the 1986 playoffs, Quebec was stunningly swept in the first round by the Hartford Whalers, despite their division crown. The early exit foreshadowed cracks beneath the surface. The following year, 1987, the Nordiques had another strong regular season and again dueled Montreal in a 7-game playoff epic, which Montreal narrowly won. By then, the Battle of Quebec was at its peak. Every meeting was a must-see event, but these playoff disappointments hinted that Quebec's window might be closing. And indeed, the storm clouds were gathering. As the 1980s came to an end, the Nordiques roster, once young and dynamic, began aging. Beloved coach Michel Bergeron, the fiery personality who had helmed the team through the most of the decade, departed in 1987, and the revolving door of coaches followed. Fan favorites also moved on. Dale Hunter was traded in 1987, and in March 1990, the Nordiques dealt away Michel Goulet to Chicago and Peter Stastny to New Jersey, in separate moves to jumpstart a rebuild. Quebec's final bid for 1980s glory came with a splash of nostalgia in 1989. Legendary Canadian star Guy Lafleur signed with Quebec in a brief comeback, hoping to recapture magic in his home province. But Lafleur, by then in his late 30s, could only offer flashes of his old brilliance. The Nordiques sank to last place in 1987 to 1988, ending a 7-year playoff streak, and stayed at the bottom in the Adams division for 5 straight seasons. And by 1989, Quebec had the league's worst record, 27, 46 and 7, a stunning fall from grace. The collapse was painful, but it set the stage for a dramatic renewal through the NHL draft. Finishing dead last had one silver lining: top draft picks. In 1987, Quebec snagged 17-year-old sniper named Joe Sakic, 15 overall, who would soon become the face of the franchise. And then came a streak of 3 consecutive #1 overall draft picks, in which the Nordiques selected Swedish forward Mats Sundin, first overall in 1989, making him the first European-born first #1 pick, followed by power forward Owen Nolan in 1990 and Eric Lindros in 1991. The selection of Eric Lindros in 1991 was meant to be the final piece of Quebec's rebuild, but it exploded into hockey's most infamous controversies. Lindros, a generational talent dubbed the next one, had publicly refused to play for Quebec even before the draft. He and his family cited the Nordiques' small market limitations, lack of endorsement potential, and even the fact that he had to learn French as reason for their stance. On the 3rd, the Nordiques drafted him anyway. A tense standoff ensued. Lindros refused to report, declining the Nordiques' jersey on draft day, except for a quick, awkward photo op. The team president insisted he would not trade the young star, proclaiming Lindros would not have a career in the NHL if he did not sign in Quebec. As the holdout stretched on for a full year, the situation grew increasingly untenable. Finally, in June 1992, the Nordiques made a franchise-altering decision. They traded Lindros' rights in what is now regarded as one of the most loop-sided deals in hockey history. Quebec received a package including Peter Forsberg, forwards Mike Ritchie, Chris Simon, goalie Ron Hextall, defenseman Steve Duchesne, and Kerry Hoffman, 2 first-round draft picks and $15 million in cash. The trade was massive, instantly injecting the Nordiques with veteran experience and future assets. Forsberg in particular would prove a gem. Though he continued to develop overseas for a couple of years, his arrival was greatly anticipated. The Nordiques also still had Sakic and Sundin forming a youthful core. Suddenly, a team that had been an NHL doormat for 5 seasons had one of the league's brightest futures. As one report put it, the Lindros trade transformed the Nordiques from a league's doormat to a legitimate Stanley Cup contender almost overnight. The transformation showed on the ice. In 1992-93 season, led by Sakic's leadership and an emerging cast, Quebec engineered the biggest single-season turnaround in NHL history, vaulting from a mere 52 points to 104 points. That year, the Nordiques made the playoffs for the first time in 6 years, finishing among the league's top teams. However, heartbreak struck in the 1993 playoffs, when the Nordiques, despite securing home ice advantage in the first round, were upset by the eventual champion, the Montreal Canadiens. Quebec won the first 2 games only to drop the next 4. Still, the season felt like a sign sign of good things to come. Joe Sakic and Sudin each topped 100 points, and the team's young coach, Pierre Paget, was a finalist for Coach of the Year. For Quebec fans who endured the losing of the late 80s, 1992-93 relinked hope that a Stanley Cup parade down the city's old streets might not just be a dream. That hope wavered slightly in the 1993-94 season. Despite expectations, the Nordiques stumbled due to injuries and inconsistency, missing the playoffs. In a controversial move that summer, the team traded away Matt Sudin to Toronto in exchange for veteran forward Wendell Clark. The trade shocked fans, and in hindsight was viewed as a misstep, as Clark's impact in Quebec was short-lived. However, fast forward to the spring of 1995, the Nordiques seemed to have it all: a dynamic, young roster, passionate fans, and legitimate Stanley Cup contention status. Under new head coach Mark Crawford, the team surged to be the best in the Eastern Conference in 1994-95. Although the season was interrupted by a labor lockout, the Nordiques signaled they were among the NHL's elite. Joe Sakic was now an established superstar and team captain. Forsberg was an instant impact player, and supporting cast like Owen Nolan, Mike Ritchie, Adam Foote provided a balance of scoring and grit. On the ice, the Nordiques were finally fulfilling the promise that years of rebuilding had created. However, storm clouds were gathering now off the ice. The same lockout that delayed the season also underscored the economic cracks in the NHL structure. No salary cap was implemented in the new collective agreement, and limited revenue sharing meant rich and poor teams continued to play by very different rules. For Quebec, one of the league's smallest markets, this was ominous news. The franchise's financial struggles, long and undercurrent, were becoming impossible to ignore, even amid all nice success. Quebec's payroll had grown with its young stars, but the revenue to support an NHL club in a small city with a limited corporate base just wasn't keeping up. Fans had been joyous about the team's revival, but behind closed doors, ownership was warning that without major changes, the Nordiques could no longer survive in Quebec City. On ice, however, in the 1995 playoffs, the Nordiques were upset in the first round by the New York Rangers, abruptly ending their season. No one realized it at the time, but that Game 6 loss on May 16, 1995 would be the last game Quebec Nordiques ever played. In the days that followed, the franchise's financial crisis moved to center stage. The team's owner, Marcel Aubu, had been urgently seeking aid, either a bailout or a new arena, from provincial and local governments. The 46-year-old Colisée, while beloved, lacked modern revenue generators like luxury suites and ample concession space. Average attendance, which had been sagged during the losing years, rebounded with the team's success, but even sellouts in a 15,399-seat arena only went so far. And critically, the Canadian dollar had declined in value versus the US dollar, meaning the Nordiques, who earned revenues in Canadian currency but paid players salaries in US dollars, were at a significant disadvantage. The new realities of hockey industry, as Aubu grimly called them, meant small Canadian franchises were getting squeezed. Quebec City by 1995 was by far the smallest market in the NHL, a metro area of roughly 500,000, competing with cities 5, 10, even 20 times its size in population. As one Los Angeles Times report noted, with about 170,000 residents in the city and around 500,000 in the metropolitan area, Quebec City was the smallest market in the league, dotted with small and medium-sized markets. The same report laid out the Nordique struggles. Tradition became a casualty in the clash between rising player salaries and limited revenues. The team projected an operating loss of $10 million for 1994-95, and even bigger losses, 12 to 14 million, if it remained in Quebec the next year. Simply put it, the numbers didn't add up. Local fans, once optimistic, what was coming. The warning signs were there. Government officials balking at funding a new arena, rumors of American buyers circling, and when the final plea for public funding failed in 1995, reality hit hard. Quebec Premier Jacques Parizeau, whose separatist government was reluctant to subsidize a sports team while cutting social services, refused to give the Nordiques the blank check they sought. Aubu wanted a brand new arena, rent-free, plus guarantees against future losses, an agreement the cash-strapped province found politically impossible. A last-ditch proposal by the province, offering a smaller infusion of money and an ownership stake, was deemed too little, too temporary, by the Nordiques' ownership. Unfortunately, the offer of aid we received from the government was not in line with what it takes to keep a professional NHL club in Quebec City, Aubu commented as negotiations collapsed. On May 25, 1995, Quebec's worst fears were confirmed. Aubu and the team's shareholders announced the sale of the Nordiques to Comsat Entertainment Group, an American company based in Denver, Colorado. The franchise would relocate to Denver immediately, rebranding as the Colorado Avalanche for the upcoming 95-96 season. The sale price, $75 million, USD, underscored the economic disparity. It was a huge sum for the day, yet Denver's ownership was willing to pay it, knowing a larger market and a new arena awaited. For Quebec City, it was an almost surreal punch to the gut. After 23 seasons of highs and lows, the city's beloved Nordiques were gone. That summer, moving trucks loaded with hockey equipment, and the franchise set up shop in Denver. Reborn as the Colorado Avalanche, the team would play temporarily Nichols Arena until a new, modern venue could be built. In Quebec, there was anger and heartbreak, but also grim understanding that the fight had been lost. As one local journalist remarked, Quebec City will become a cemetery, with Parizeau as the caretaker, assigning blame to the provincial leader for letting the team slip away. Fans grieved the loss of not just the team, but a piece of their identity. Adding insult to injury, the very next season, the Colorado Avalanche achieved what the Nordiques never could. They won the Stanley Cup. It was Colorado's first year in the league, a championship in their inaugural season, something no modern expansion team or relocated team had ever done. For Denver sports fans, it was euphoria. It marked the city's first major pro championship in any sport. But for Quebec, watching the Stanley Cup parade in another city by players who had been wearing Quebec jerseys just months earlier was too much to bear. However, the Nordiques left a legacy. 6 of the Quebec Nordiques players, Peter Stastny, Michel Goulet, Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, Matt Sudin, Guy Lafleur, are enshrined in the Hockey Hall of Fame. The team opened NHL doors to Eastern European talent, and the franchise drafted the first European #1 pick and helped pioneer scouting overseas. The Battle of Quebec remains one of the hockey's legendary rivalries, often remembered about in documentaries and articles as an era when provincial pride played out on the ice of unmatched rivalry. In the decades since 1995, Quebec City's love affair with hockey has only grown stronger, and so has its desire to bring the NHL back. The loss of Nordiques sparked civic determination. Over 80,000 people marched in 2010 during the Blue March rally, dressed in Nordiques blue and chanting for the NHL's team's return. The message was clear: Quebec City is still a hockey city and it wants its team back. Crucially, the obstacles that once doomed the Nordiques have begun to be addressed. In 2015, Quebec City opened a brand new arena, a sparkling 18,000-seat facility equipped with all the modern amenities a hockey team would need. This arena, financed by a partnership between the city, province, and media company, was built largely with the express purpose of luring the NHL back in. It stands as a state-of-the-art stage waiting for a team, and the arena has already hosted NHL preseason games and international tournaments, proving that Quebec's fanbase will pack the stands for big events. Since the mid-90s, several economic factors have improved for small market NHL teams. The 2005 introduction of the salary cap helped level the playing field, while revenue sharing and lucrative Canadian TV deals have provided more stability. The Canadian dollar has occasionally reached near parity with the US dollar, though it still fluctuates. Ownership in Quebec is also stronger now. Media giant Quebecor, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, owns French language sports networks and has openly campaigned for a team and would likely be the franchise owner, offering deep pockets and built-in media support. Despite this, the NHL's return to Quebec City still remains uncertain. With 32 teams, the league is cautious about expansion and prefers US markets like Houston or Atlanta for their larger TV audiences. Quebec, while passionate, is a small market and would increase the Eastern Conference imbalance. Commissioner Gary Bettman has praised Quebec's enthusiasm, but cited market considerations. One executive noted that unless an owner is willing to pay a massive expansion fee, $1 to $2 billion, a team isn't likely. Quebec applied during the 2015 expansion round, but was passed over in favor of Las Vegas. 3 decades after the Nordiques' departure, Quebec City stands as a testament to both the heartbreak of losing a team and to the community that refuses to let its hockey spirit die. The Nordiques story, from WHA underdogs to NHL contenders to relocation heartbreak and enduring legacy, is a rich chapter in hockey history, and perhaps one day the final chapter of a Stanley Cup in Quebec City will finally be fulfilled. Until that day, however, the Nordiques will live in memories and the biggest what-ifs in hockey history.